Hi everyone, I am here today to answer what I think is my most asked bookish question on here, which is really hard to say, and that is, how do you get out of a reading slump? How does one transition out of the realm of reading slumpery and into a world where one wants to read books again and gets enjoyment out of that? You may find yourself in a reading slump for a variety of reasons, some of which I will touch upon in this video. So I thought I would sit down and give you some tips. I have made a list actually of 10 things I would recommend either doing or thinking about if you find yourself in a reading slump. This video is also very kindly sponsored by Skillshare, so I'll talk about that in a second. On to the 10 points. Point number 1 is a question or a series of questions that I would like you to ask yourself first and foremost, and that is, does it matter that you're in a reading slump? Do you want to get out of this reading slump? Do you have to get out of this reading slump? I found myself, I would say, in probably 3 different kinds of reading slumps in the past. So sometimes I might be feeling really stressed and anxious and I'm finding it difficult to concentrate, and I want to be reading, but I'm finding that difficult, and that is putting me into a reading slump. So that is an example of a reading slump where I want to read and I want to find a way to have enjoyment out of books. 2 other kinds of reading slumps. One I particularly experienced after leaving university. I did an English literature degree, and I think like most people doing an English literature degree, by the end I kind of just wanted a break from books for a little while, just a little one, because I love books very, very much. But you know, I'd been reading 3 600+ page books a week and writing critical theory on them, and I just thought, you know what, I'm gonna go play some board games or something instead. So that was an example of a reading slump where I was in a slump but didn't care that I was in it and didn't have to be reading stuff for work. So I thought, I'm gonna just lean into it, take this break, and that's absolutely fine. And then there's something kind of in the middle of those 2 things where you may be in a reading slump and you would quite like to take a break, but you have an obligation, so you have to finish a particular book. Maybe you've got a book club coming up, I don't know. In my case, books are my job now. I write, I teach, I host panels where I have to interview authors and I need to have read their books. I review books for various outlets. So whilst I enjoy reading most of the time, 95+% of the time, occasionally there are times when I think I would rather be doing something else, but I have to read this book, which is a privileged position to be in. So in that case, I'm in a reading slump, but I have to push through and I need to find a way to get on with reading. So there are 2 kinds of reading slumps there, which are needing or wanting to get back to reading, and the rest of the points in this list relate to those. But the other one, the being in a reading slump, not particularly wanting to pick up a book and being okay with that, I say lean into that. If you are in that position, don't feel like you have to be reading things. Reading in that case is something you should be doing for fun. I think BookTube can give obviously a warped view of the reading world. I work in the publishing industry. I have done for the last 15 years. I am your bookish fairy godmother. I read all of these books basically so that you don't have to. I read all of them and then I'm your filter and I say, I would particularly recommend these books. So don't feel some kind of weird pressure that you should be reading if books are something that you're doing for fun. You don't want to read? That's absolutely fine. And this is where Skillshare comes into play, because Skillshare has lots of videos about things that aren't related to books. They do have bookish videos too, but they have loads of different things that can occupy your brain in other ways. So I am gonna insert a clip of me talking about that for 2 minutes, sitting in a different location in this room for some reason, and then I'm gonna come back to you in 2 minutes and talk to you about the other things to help you get out of a reading slump. Look, we've moved across the room by the magic of editing. There's much better lighting here, but I am sitting on the floor and my knees will get cross with me. So I am gonna film this section speedily and then we're gonna get back to sitting on a chair so I can talk to you about the rest of the reading slump tips. As I mentioned, this video is very kindly sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community and I have been working with them pretty much as long as I've had a YouTube channel. I think that what they do is brilliant. They have over 25,000 classes on so many different things: cooking, baking, pottery, illustration, calligraphy, how to start a business, how to build a website. They have so many things that you might want to do for fun, and they also have classes that you might find useful in a workplace environment. So in whatever capacity you would like to use their site, you can. I have mentioned lots of their classes in previous videos, and the one that I want to highlight today is one on cooking. I think I've said this in previous videos, but because my job is so creative, when I approach cooking, which I adore doing, I want to do that primarily in a creative but structured way, so following recipes mainly, and having that step-by-step process is really good for my brain. It helps me focus. I love it. However, I do want to get better at intuitive cooking and more creative cooking, using ingredients that have been left over, things in the fridge and the cupboards that need to be used so as not to be wasteful. And I do try and come up with recipes, and sometimes those are successful and sometimes they are not. So to get better at that intuitive bit, the Skillshare video and class that I wanted to mention today that I am really looking forward to watching is one called Kitchen Confidence: Practical Tips for Cooking with Intuition by Julie Yoon. And she is talking about how you can think about specific ingredients and combinations, how you can best utilize what's in your fridge, how to think about patterns when it comes to food and putting things together. And I just think it's going to be really, really useful. So I look forward to watching that and then applying that to my cooking life. Skillshare have very kindly offered a link, which I've put at the top of the description box down below. And the first 1,000 of you to click on that link will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium. They're putting up new classes all the time. All of their classes are in bite-sized chunks so that you can fit them into your day. And if you do want to stay on after the free trial ends, it's a very affordable platform too. So do go and check out that link and see what they have to offer. Thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Okay, so these are the points for if you're in a reading slump and you either want to or have to get out of it. So point number 2 has 2 points to it, A and B. 2A is to pick up an old favorite book. This is something that I know is recommended a lot. It's something that I have definitely gone back to time and time again. If I need a book that will just help me relax when I'm reading, especially if I'm feeling anxious, then going back to an old favorite, being wrapped up in that nostalgia helps me focus. Something I've done before is to get a old favorite in a different form. So perhaps listening to an audiobook of a favorite book that you've only read on paper before. And I think that's particularly helpful if you're feeling anxious, because then you can listen to it whilst doing other things. So you can occupy your body and your brain simultaneously. And 2B would be, I was going to do a Hamlet quote, I won't. 2B would be that you could also pick up a new book, but a new book that is inspired by a book that you have loved. So for instance, earlier this year, I read Passing by Nella Larson, because that was a book that inspired The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, which I read last year and really loved. So in that case, you're picking up a new book that you already have an emotional attachment to, and that will help you bond with that particular book. That's what I have found in the past. Point number 3 has an A, B, and C to it. So 3A is to leave your phone in another room. If you are struggling to concentrate, put that phone somewhere else, out of sight. Point B is to do timed reading periods. And I found setting time-related goals to things, not just reading, but other things in my life, really helpful. So for instance, with regards to writing, I used to set word count goals. And sometimes that's helpful, particularly if you have a deadline. But if you don't have a deadline, I have found it helpful to say, instead of I'm going to sit down and write 1,000 words, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write for half an hour or 1 hour. I think it lends itself to less procrastination, and there's no pressure on that because it's a time goal. You do what you can in that time frame. So with reading, instead of saying I'm going to read 100 pages today, instead just say I'm going to sit down and read for 20 minutes. And that time goes past very quickly, and again, less procrastination. And point 3C ties in with that, and that is to use reading rooms. I love reading rooms. Those are things that you can find on YouTube. So they are reading room ASMRs. I have made a couple of them myself, which is where I'm reading a book. I made one in springtime with all birds tweeting outside. I made one in the summer where I was reading in a forest and there was all of the forest sounds around me. I also made one when it was snowing and one when it was a thunderstorm, which was really, really cozy. And each of those is 20 minutes long. So you can put a video of mine on or someone else's where that person is reading and it's just a calming video. And then you have that set period of time and you sit down and you read a book in that time too. I will link some of my favorite reading room videos in the description box down below. Point number 4 is to start and finish a book, something short, so you get that sense of achievement that you have completed something. Sometimes I am feeling stressed and fall into a reading slump if I have lots of currently reading books on my bedside table, which I do currently have right now, and I have those if I'm feeling stressed and anxious, so it is a loop. And to break that, I often like to read a new short book, feel like, okay, well, I did finish that, so then I can go and finish these other ones. Tricking your brain. I have made videos before where I have recommended books under 200 pages, so I will link those in the description box down below. And an alternative to reading something short, or something that's short but also happens to be this too, is to read a short story collection and tell yourself, right, I'm going to read one short story a day until this book is finished. And that seems like quite an achievable goal to have. Point number 5 would be to read a fast-paced book. So something that just grips your imagination and you cannot put it down. I recently read a book called Losing You by Nikki French, which definitely falls into that category. It's set over the course of one day and it's about a woman who is desperately trying to find her daughter. And I wasn't in a reading slump at the time, but I think if I was, it definitely would have pulled me out of it. Point number 6 links in with number 2. So number 2 was to read an old favorite, a comfort book. If that doesn't work, you've tried reading an old favorite, you're still in a reading slump, I would do the opposite of that, and that is to go out and read a new book that is entirely out of your comfort zone. Pick up a genre that you don't normally read, or a form you don't normally read in. So you could read a graphic novel, for instance, if you don't normally read graphic novels. Graphic novels are often helpful for reading slumps too, and reading a different genre or a different format should stimulate your brain and make you think about what you're reading in a different way. It can also not help because you might just hate it because it's a genre you don't like for a particular reason. But I mean, I'm just throwing ideas out there, and it maybe is something that you want to try. Try and shock the system and read something that you would never normally pick up and just see how you feel about it. If anything, if you hate it, it might make you long to go back to the kind of book that you normally read, and perhaps it could be helpful in that respect, even if you didn't end up liking the new book that you tried. Point number 7, in a similar vein, you could read in an entirely different way. And by that I mean, if you are someone like me who reads books for work and you are used to having to analyze books, if you are a critic, or maybe you're doing an English literature degree, you're used to really pulling texts apart and studying them, do the opposite. Read for fun for a bit. Read something that is not what you would normally need to study or would have to read for work. Read something different. The flip side of that would be if you are someone who reads primarily for pleasure and doesn't do a deep dive analysis of everything that you're reading. I don't mean that you're not reading critically, but you're not writing essays about the book that you're reading. Maybe try it, like just for a little bit, just to see how that suits you. So I have a whole playlist on this channel of videos where I've done in-depth text analysis about certain novels and poems. So I will link that down below. You can go to one of those videos, see what book I'm talking about, go off and read it, and then come back and we can chat in the comments section about the imagery in that book and the extended metaphors. It's just nice to mix it up every once in a while. I like to read books for fun, and I also like to read books to be analytical about them, and I dance between the two. So I encourage you to do the same if that tickles your fancy. What point are we on now? Point number 8? I think it's point number 8. So 8 kind of links in with the one before, and that is to talk about books. Reading can be such a solitary thing, and I think it's nice to kind of step out of that a little bit, and that's why I have this channel. So stepping out of the solitary reading doesn't actually mean you have to talk to other people if you don't want to, but I mean engage with the bookish community. you're already doing that if you're watching this video, but BookTube is great for that. I feel really inspired to read books and get out of reading slumps if I'm watching other BookTubers videos where they're talking passionately about books that they love. You might want to join a book club. That could be in person or online. You might want to attend book events. There have been lots of online book events during the last year, so it's been a really fun way to engage with different parts of the industry, listening to authors talking about their work. You could listen to bookish podcasts. I think what I mean is just basically engaging with books in ways other than reading. So talking to people about what you've been reading or books that you love, listen to people talking about the books that they love, listen to people critically analyze books, listen to authors talk about their craft and process. I think all of those things foster a love of reading and can help you get out of a reading slump. Point number 9 is to reorganize your bookshelves. This is definitely something that has helped me in reading slumps before. Pull everything off your shelves. Give your bookcases a clean, wipe them down and then go through each title and then put everything back on the shelves. Anything that you think you won't be rereading or anything you might want to pass on to somebody else, put that in a pile somewhere else and reacquaint yourself with titles that you may have forgotten about, that you were excited about once you bought them, but they've been sitting on your shelf and you haven't read the blurb for a while. Going through bookshelves can really be invigorating and make you excited to read the stuff that you already own. And also having a clear out, I think, just helps our brains. Point number 10, if you're someone who the above point doesn't apply to because you don't own many books that you haven't read or you use your library mostly, even if you're not falling into those categories, this can apply to everybody. My final point is to treat yourself to a couple of hours in a bookshop or library or browsing online. I've done all of my book shopping in the past 18 months online, going through bookshop catalogues, and whilst I miss going into physical bookshops, it has been really a joy to spend that time going through bookshop websites and also reading publisher catalogues and seeing what's coming out. Make a thing out of it. I was going to say get some tea and some snacks. That only really works if you're at home browsing. You can't really do that in a physical space, but take the time for you, a couple of hours or less, whatever you want to do, where you're going to go into a bookshop or a library or browse online, and the goal is to come away with one book. I know, one book. And in that time, you are going to read the blurbs of lots of books. You're going to wander around. You're going to take your time. And then when it comes down to it, the book that you decide to buy or borrow is going to feel like such a precious thing because you have invested time in making this decision. It is not an impulse buy. It is something that is weighted, and hopefully because of that, it's going to make you want to read it straight away. So, or in the case of browsing online, whenever it arrives in the post. So those are my 10 things that I would recommend thinking about or doing if you happen to find yourself in a reading slump. Either lean into it if it's a reading slump that doesn't particularly matter, chill out, do other things, and then when the love of reading tempts you back, come back, or follow these other points if reading is something that you desperately want to be doing or that you need to do for whatever particular reason. I hope that this was helpful. I would love to know if you have any recommendations for getting out of reading slumps. Leave those in a comment down below. Thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. As I mentioned, the link is at the top of the description. Click on that to get your free trial. I hope you're all having a great start to the week, and I will speak to you soon. Sending lots of love. Bye.